Everyone thought they were untouchable. Icons, legends, women who conquered Hollywood with talent, beauty, and unbreakable strength. But when the cameras shut off and the applause faded, a darker truth emerged. Behind the red carpets and million-dollar smiles was a silent enemy no fame could outrun. Cancer didn't care about awards, status, or legacy. These are the stories the spotlight never wanted you to see. The battles fought in pain, in fear, and in heartbreaking silence. Which legend fell hardest when the lights went out? Anna Maria Horsford, the smile that hid a war. Hollywood remembered her laughter, the sharp timing, the effortless charm. Anna Maria Horsford was the woman who lit up every room she entered, a familiar face audiences trusted and adored. On screen, she radiated confidence and warmth, a presence that felt unbreakable. But behind that smile, something was quietly unraveling. In 2022, the pain began, sharp, persistent, impossible to ignore. At first, she dismissed it as stress, age, exhaustion, the usual excuses of someone who had spent a lifetime pushing forward. Then the truth arrived without mercy: colon cancer. Everything stopped. Surgery took more than part of her body. Chemotherapy drained her strength, her energy, her voice. The woman who once commanded stages now struggled to stand for long. By 2023, she faded from major projects. Her final appearances marked not by applause, but by worried glances and uncomfortable silence. Those closest to her spoke of sleepless nights, of pain she hid from the world, of a quiet fear she carried alone, refusing to let the public see her break. She never asked for sympathy, she never chased attention, and that is what makes her story unsettling. If a woman this strong could be brought to her knees in silence, who would be next? Alfre Woodard, strength doesn't stop the damage. Alfre Woodard built her legacy on resilience. Every role she touched carried depth, dignity, and quiet power. On screen, she embodied survival itself, a woman who endured, no matter the cost. Audiences believed her strength because it felt lived in, earned. But even the strongest lungs can fail. In 2022, the warning signs appeared. A cough that wouldn't leave. Breathlessness during rehearsals. Fatigue she couldn't push through. At first, she told herself it was nothing. A cold exhaustion, time catching up. Then doctors delivered the truth. Lung cancer. Stage 2. The word alone changed everything. Surgery cut deep. Chemotherapy and radiation followed, stripping her body of what control remained. The weight fell fast. Her hair disappeared. Chest pain kept her awake as fear filled the silence of long nights. Eventually, an oxygen tank became part of her daily life, a cruel contrast to the woman who once commanded every scene with ease. By 2023, she retreated from major roles. Public appearances became rare, and when she did appear, fans saw it instantly. Slower steps, hollowed cheeks, eyes carrying exhaustion no makeup could hide. What hurt most wasn't the pain. It was watching her legendary strength slip away. Still, she kept going, supporting young artists, speaking softly about hope, refusing to let illness define her ending. If resilience could cure cancer, she would have survived untouched. And that truth is what makes her story impossible to forget. If you or someone you love is battling a serious illness, please take a moment to share a message of hope, strength, or peace in the comments. Your words may bring comfort, encouragement, and a sense of calm to those who need it most right now. Sheila E, the rhythm that refused to die. Sheila E was never just a musician. She was rhythm incarnate. Every strike of the drum carried power, confidence, and control. On stage, she moved like someone untouchable, fearless, precise, alive. Audiences believed her energy was endless. Wouldn't you, after watching her dominate every performance without mercy? Then the silence crept in. A lump, a diagnosis, breast cancer. Surgery came quickly, followed by chemotherapy that stripped away more than hair and strength. The sticks felt heavier, her joints ached. Fatigue turned simple movement into a battle. Tours were canceled. Appearances faded. Fans began to notice the pauses, the careful steps, the pain behind her eyes. What happens when the beat that defines you starts to hurt? Still, she showed up, not with the fire of before, but with resolve. Charity stages replaced stadiums. Courage replaced adrenaline. Behind closed doors were sleepless nights and fear she rarely spoke aloud. Fear of the disease returning, fear of losing her sound forever, yet she kept playing even when it hurt. Debbie Allen, when movement became pain. Debbie Allen lived through motion. Dance wasn't just her art, it was her identity. For decades, she moved with fire, discipline, and absolute control, inspiring generations to believe the body could be trained to obey the will. So when her body began sending warning signs, she dismissed them. Would you listen if movement had always been your greatest weapon? The diagnosis destroyed that illusion. Endometrial cancer. Surgery changed her body forever, and chemotherapy drained the energy that once fueled her every step. The woman who commanded stages now moved carefully, measuring each breath, each motion. Pain followed her everywhere, on set, backstage, even at rest. Appearances became rare, and when she did step out, fans noticed the truth she tried to hide. How do you teach strength when your own body refuses to cooperate? Directing replaced dancing. Mentoring replaced performing. Even as fatigue bent her posture and pain slowed her pace, her voice remained firm, her presence undeniable. Those close to her saw fear, not of death, but of losing who she had always been. And that leaves one haunting question. When your body takes away the thing that defines you, who are you forced to become? Felicia Rashad, the mother America trusted learned fear. For generations, Felicia Rashad was safety itself. She wasn't just a star, she was America's mother. Calm, elegant, unshakable. Even decades into her career, she continued to command respect, proving time had not weakened her presence. So when discomfort began creeping into her daily life, she ignored it. Wouldn't you if you'd spent a lifetime being strong for everyone else? The truth arrived quietly but cut deeply. In 2022, doctors confirmed ovarian cancer. Surgery followed, then treatment. The pain lingered longer than expected, draining her strength, altering her body, forcing her to slow down for the first time in her life. Public appearances became calculated. Teaching replaced acting. Behind the composed posture was exhaustion she could no longer hide. How do you keep being the pillar when your body starts to crumble? Yet she never disappeared. She showed up, to classrooms, to communities, to moments that mattered. But those closest to her noticed the pauses, the careful movements, the moments where she gathered herself before continuing. Fear lived there now, not loud, not dramatic, just present. And that raises the hardest question of all, when even the strongest role models are scared. Where do we find our courage? CCH Pounder, the queen who refused to collapse. For decades, CCH Pounder was power itself. Her voice carried authority. Her presence demanded respect. On screen, she didn't ask for control, and she owned it. Audiences believed her strength was real because it felt unshakable. Then her body betrayed her. It started quietly. A small lump. A strained voice. Difficulty swallowing lines she had delivered flawlessly for years. In 2022, the diagnosis landed like a sentence. Thyroid cancer. No warning. No negotiation. Surgery came fast. Too fast. When the thyroid was removed, something else disappeared with it, her familiar strength. Radiation followed, burning through her energy, thinning her hair, stealing weight from a woman who once stood like stone. Her voice trembled, no longer the weapon it had been. By 2023, she stepped away from major roles. Public appearances grew rare. Fans noticed the pauses in her walk, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she leaned on others just to remain standing. Yet she never broke publicly. Behind closed doors were sleepless nights, aching bones, and a fear she rarely named, the fear that the disease might return stronger than before. Still, she showed up, for her community, for her heritage, for herself. So would you take a moment to leave a heartfelt message of well wishes for them? Even a few kind words can bring comfort and help lighten their hearts. Lynn Whitfield, the light that quietly began to fade. Lynn Whitfield was elegance personified. On screen, she carried grace, intelligence, and emotional depth that made every performance feel timeless. From portraying Josephine Baker to commanding dramatic roles, she looked like a woman untouched by weakness. Would anyone ever imagine her slowing down? The signs came softly, then relentlessly. Exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, fevers that appeared without warning, bruises blooming across her skin for no reason at all. At first, she blamed stress, pressure, work, until doctors spoke the words that changed everything. Chronic lymphocytic leukemia? How do you process a disease that doesn't arrive loudly but drains you piece by piece? Treatment was brutal. Immunotherapy and chemotherapy stripped weight from her body, color from her skin, and strength from her bones. Public appearances grew rare. When she did step out, fans noticed the difference. Slower steps, hollowed eyes, a fragility that felt shocking. Behind closed doors were long days of pain and silent fear about what tomorrow might bring. Whoopi Goldberg, the laugh that suddenly went quiet. Whoopi Goldberg was never just funny. She was fearless, loud, unfiltered. A woman whose voice cut through rooms and whose laughter felt indestructible. From Oscar-winning performances to commanding the table on The View, she looked like someone nothing could slow down. So when she brushed off the first warning signs, who would blame her? It started with a mark, a dark spot on her skin that didn't seem dangerous, until it was. In early 2024, doctors confirmed skin cancer. The word hit harder than any headline she had ever faced. Surgery removed the cancer, but treatment drained her in ways cameras couldn't hide. Weight dropped, energy vanished. Her voice softened. How do you stay sharp when your own body feels unfamiliar? Fans noticed before she spoke. Fewer appearances, longer pauses. A woman who once dominated conversations now conserving strength between sentences. Behind closed doors were sleepless nights, persistent pain, and moments when even humor couldn't mask fear. Yet she refused to disappear. She kept showing up, tired, quieter, but unbroken. Mary J. Blige, the voice that learned pain. Mary J. Blige sang from the soul. Her voice carried heartbreak, survival, and raw truth, the kind that made millions feel understood. She wasn't just a singer, she was a lifeline. Strong, resilient, unbreakable. At least, that's what the world believed. But what happens when the voice that heals others begins to suffer in silence? In 2023, the fear became real. A small lump, then pain that wouldn't fade. Doctors confirmed breast cancer, and everything she thought she controlled slipped away. Surgery was only the beginning. Chemotherapy followed, ruthless and unforgiving. Her hair fell out, her body weakened. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized. How do you keep your image intact when your strength is disappearing? The stage grew distant. Performances became rare. When she did appear, she paused more often, fighting nausea, bone pain, and exhaustion. Behind the wigs and composed smile was a woman battling anxiety about the future, a future she could no longer predict. Yet she chose to speak, to share her struggle, to stand for others walking the same road. Rebecca King Cruz, the woman who stayed strong off camera. Rebecca King Cruz was never chasing the spotlight. She lived behind it, holding a family together, anchoring a household the world admired. To the public, she represented stability, love, and quiet strength. The kind of woman people assume will always be fine. But is anyone ever really safe just because they look strong? Her battle began without drama, a routine checkup, a small lump, breast cancer. The words landed softly, but the impact was devastating. Surgery came first, then chemotherapy that stripped away her energy, her hair, and her sense of control. While cameras followed her husband, Rebecca fought privately, nausea, pain, exhaustion, and fear becoming part of daily life. How many women suffer in silence simply because no one is looking at them? She didn't disappear. She endured. Fewer public appearances, slower steps, a body clearly weakened, yet a will that refused to collapse. She continued supporting her family, showing up when it mattered most, even as every movement hurt. Recent images revealed the truth no interviews could hide. How many unseen battles are being fought right now by people we only notice when they break? Tamika Catchings, when a champion faced her hardest opponent. Tamika Catchings was built to endure. A WNBA legend. A symbol of discipline, resilience, and relentless drive. She spent her life pushing through pain, injuries, and pressure, winning championships and respect the hard way. To fans, she looked invincible. But what happens when the opponent isn't on the court? In 2024, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Chest pain, swollen lymph nodes, fatigue that training couldn't fix. When doctors confirmed stage 4 breast cancer, the shock hit harder than any loss she'd ever known. Treatment began immediately. Aggressive, exhausting, unforgiving. Weight dropped fast. Hair fell out. Bone pain turned simple movements into daily battles. Even speaking for long periods became difficult. How do you fight when your body no longer follows your commands? The spotlight shifted. Games were replaced by hospital visits. Public appearances became remote. Fans noticed the quieter voice, the slower pace, the guarded strength. Yet Tamika didn't retreat completely. She continued mentoring young athletes, showing up through podcasts and charities, proving leadership doesn't disappear with physical power. Regina King, when silence became survival. Regina King was the definition of control. An Oscar winner, a director, a woman who carried strength without ever raising her voice. After years of commanding the screen with intensity and precision, she looked untouchable. Especially after enduring personal loss with dignity the public could barely comprehend. But strength doesn't grant immunity. In 2022, her body sent warnings she tried to rationalize away. Abdominal discomfort, fatigue, a faint yellowing of the skin. Stress, she thought. Grief, perhaps. The truth arrived colder than expected: liver cancer. Surgery removed part of her liver, but chemotherapy took something else: her energy, her weight, her privacy. The woman who once moved with certainty now measured every step. Public appearances slowed, roles were postponed, cameras caught glimpses of fragility she never announced. Why do we only notice someone's pain when it finally becomes visible? Regina chose silence over spectacle. She stepped behind the camera, focusing on directing, on mentoring, on surviving. Those close to her spoke of constant exhaustion, recurring pain, and a fear she kept tightly controlled. Yet she kept creating, kept showing up, even when standing hurt. Anika Noni rose when a princess learned fear. Anika Noni Rose once gave a generation its fairy tale voice. Elegant, poised, powerful. From dream girls to becoming a Disney princess, her career looked like proof that talent and grace were enough to protect a woman from life's cruelty. She embodied hope, especially for young girls who saw themselves in her. Then her body rewrote the story. In 2021, pain and irregular bleeding became impossible to ignore. At first, she blamed exhaustion, a demanding schedule, anything but fear. The diagnosis arrived without softness: cervical cancer, stage 2. Surgery altered her body. Radiation drained her strength. The woman who once sang effortlessly now measured her days by pain levels and fatigue. Work slowed. Roles became smaller. Public appearances revealed a thinner frame, quieter energy, careful movements. Fans noticed, not because she announced it, but because her body told the truth before she did. How unsettling is it to watch a symbol of magic confront something so brutally real? Yet she stayed visible, not glamorous, not untouched, but present. She continued advocating, creating, surviving, even when fear lived close to the surface. Her story doesn't end with triumph or tragedy. It ends with discomfort. Tichina Arnold, when laughter stopped protecting her. Tichina Arnold made pain look funny for a living. For years, she was the sharp voice, the fearless presence, the woman who turned chaos into comedy. Audiences knew her as loud, confident, impossible to ignore. She built a career on laughter, and laughter has a way of convincing people that nothing can hurt you. Until something did. In 2023, the discomfort started deep in her stomach. Nausea that wouldn't fade, pain that grew sharper by the day. She brushed it off at first. Long hours, stress, bad food, but the diagnosis erased every excuse. Stomach cancer. Treatment came fast and unforgiving. Surgery altered her body. Chemotherapy drained her energy, darkened her skin, weakened her voice. The woman who once dominated rooms now had to pause just to breathe. Work slowed. Public appearances thinned out. During podcast recordings, her hands trembled. Her words came slower, fatigue written all over her face. Friends noticed before fans did. Behind the jokes was fear. Not dramatic, not loud, just constant. She didn't announce her suffering. She lived through it. And that's what makes her story uncomfortable to sit with. Because it forces us to confront a truth we rarely admit out loud. When someone makes the world laugh, we rarely ask how much pain they're swallowing to do it. Some smiles aren't joy, they're armor. Dionne Warwick, when a timeless voice met a ruthless disease. Dionne Warwick spent a lifetime sounding eternal. Her voice didn't age. It floated through decades, carrying elegance, control, and quiet authority. To generations of listeners, she wasn't just a singer, she was permanence. Someone who felt immune to time, to weakness, to endings. Then her body told a different story. In 2023, the pain began where no one could see it. Deep abdominal discomfort, rapid weight loss, exhaustion that sleep couldn't repair. She blamed age. Everyone did. Until doctors confirmed pancreatic cancer, a diagnosis that rarely arrives gently and never leaves room for denial. Surgery followed. Chemotherapy hollowed her frame. The voice that once flowed effortlessly now required effort, breath, patience. Touring stopped. Appearances shrank to interviews and charity moments. Fans noticed the slower steps, the heaviness behind her eyes, the pauses where strength used to live. She didn't dramatize her suffering. She carried it, quietly, carefully, like she always had. What unsettles people most isn't the illness. It's the realization that even legends can fade without warning. Because if a voice that once defined generations can be reduced to whispers behind closed doors, it forces an uncomfortable thought to surface. How fragile is the legacy we assume will always be there? Pat Mitchell, the woman who stopped standing. Pat Mitchell was never meant to be visible. She built careers, shaped conversations, decided which voices mattered, all from behind the scenes. Power, for her, was never about attention. It was about control, and control had always answered to her, until her body didn't. In early 2024, the pain began in her hip, deep, relentless, the kind that interrupts sentences and rewrites plans. At first, she worked through it. She always had. But scans ended the guessing. Bone cancer. Treatment was immediate. Chemotherapy weakened her fast. Radiation made standing unbearable. The cane came quietly, then never left. Meetings shortened. Events required chairs. Projects slipped away not with drama, but with scheduling conflicts and polite excuses. Those who knew her noticed something unsettling. Pat didn't complain. She adapted. She learned which movements hurt less, which days she could last longer, which conversations were worth the effort. She never gave an interview. She never explained her absence. The last time she appeared publicly, she arrived early, sat the entire time, and left before applause. No speech, no goodbye, just a woman calculating how far the exit was. And that image lingers, not because she fell, but because she didn't wait for permission to stop standing. Adwoa Aboah, the body that rewrote the image. Adwoa Aboah was trained to be seen. Her body was her language, angular, defiant, celebrated for being different. Fashion didn't just dress her, it framed her as an idea, strength, rebellion, modern beauty. She learned early that visibility meant value. Then visibility became impossible. In 2023, her body stopped cooperating. Fatigue pressed down without warning. Fevers came and went. Lymph nodes swelled until denial felt dishonest. The diagnosis, lymphoma, didn't just threaten her health. It dismantled the image she had been paid to maintain. Chemotherapy followed. Weight dropped. Hair thinned in uneven patches. Her face no longer fit the campaigns waiting in her inbox. So she stepped back. Not strategically, not gracefully. She simply stopped showing up. Runways replaced her without comment. Editorials moved on. Invitations dried up. Healing didn't look productive, and productivity was the only thing the industry knew how to reward. Adwoa didn't explain herself. She didn't document the process. She chose privacy over relevance. The most unsettling part isn't that she got sick. It's that recovery offered her no clear way back. Because once your body no longer matches the version people invested in, survival becomes a negotiation, and not everyone is invited back to the table. Patti LaBelle, when singing stopped being effortless. Patti LaBelle had never feared her voice. For decades, it carried her through sold-out tours, late nights, and a career built on power and range. Strain was familiar. Fatigue was manageable. So when her throat began to ache in 2023, she treated it like an inconvenience. Nothing more. It wasn't. Swallowing grew painful. Notes that once flowed freely demanded effort. Doctors eventually confirmed esophageal cancer, and the diagnosis landed with brutal irony. Surgery followed. Radiation burned through her strength. Eating became careful. Speaking required pacing. The voice that once dominated rooms now needed protection. Tours were canceled quietly. Appearances shortened. When she did step on stage, fans noticed something different. Not weakness, but restraint. Breaks came more often. Songs were rearranged. The power was still there, but it arrived cautiously, as if every note had to be negotiated. Behind the scenes, Patti adjusted her life around recovery. Smaller meals, vocal rest, long silences she had never needed before. She didn't dramatize the struggle. She worked around it. The hardest change wasn't fear of death. It was accepting that her voice, the thing she trusted most, now required care instead of confidence. And once that trust is shaken, even legends learn to listen to their limits. Grace Jones, when the body interrupted the icon. Grace Jones was never built on softness. Her image was sharp, confrontational, untouchable. For decades, she turned her body into a statement, angular, disciplined, fearless. Aging never seemed to reach her the way it reached others, or so it appeared. In 2022, the pain started in her back, deep, persistent. Then came blood in her urine, something impossible to rationalize away. Doctors confirmed kidney cancer stage 2. Surgery removed part of her left kidney. Chemotherapy followed, and for the first time in her life, her body refused to perform on command. Weight dropped quickly. Strength faded unevenly. Standing for long periods became difficult. A cane appeared, not as an accessory, but a necessity. Tours were canceled, projects paused. The woman who once dominated rooms now planned her days around pain management and recovery windows. Grace didn't explain the change. She didn't soften her image to invite sympathy. She simply reduced her presence. Appearances became rare. When she did emerge, fans noticed the effort behind every step, the calculation behind every movement. At home, creativity continued, just smaller, quieter, contained. The body that once defined her legacy now set the limits. The shift wasn't about losing relevance. It was about learning that even the most controlled image can be interrupted. And once your body redraws the boundaries, defiance alone is no longer enough to cross them.